Aloha and welcome to Be Fit for Health. This is Bianca, your host. Thank you so much again for joining us on your Sunday. I know you guys probably have other things you can be doing, but I do appreciate you joining me on today's show. Really exciting. I know I say this a lot on every show that comes on, but I've been so lucky to have such incredible guests come on and talk to all of us about health and well-being and anything medical, because obviously I'm not a doctor, but I am a health expert. So I do have some say-so when it comes to the way that our bodies can work better. But when you bring on these professionals and medical doctors who can, kind of support some of our thoughts and theories on how we can live a better quality of life, it's always a thrill for me. I'm the biggest geek on the planet that I think of. I like to look at publications and read things that are not normal for the average person, but when I have these guys in here, I get to pick their brain, and that's even more fun for me because I get to learn more, which is always a good thing, right? So anyways, today's show is going to be on, our behavioral and clinical health, our mental health. And, that's a big component because I know with all of us being in quarantine, a lot of us are feeling a bit stifled and stuck somewhere and not able to do our normal routine. And that can sometimes put us in a place of maybe depression or maybe make us feel like, things are not going the way we feel out of control. And that usually puts us not in a good place. And I know a lot of us are looking for ways to cope and ways to get creative so that we have things that we can be doing that feels purposeful. And have some meaning. And, in today's show, we're lucky enough to have, let's see if I can pronounce his last name, and God bless me if I don't, and he'll correct me, I'm sure, is Dr. Tolly Amaxopoulos.
Perfect.
Okay. Listen, I have no excuse. My last name is Ekmekgiolu, guys. And no, I did not sneeze, but that is my last name. And so if I can't pronounce his name, God, I'm sorry.
It's okay. You did great.
Thank you. And, today's show is going to be on a lot of different topics when it comes to our mental health. And, I was doing a little bit of a reading, doctor, and this is in regards to nutritional health. And I always say that food is medicine. And if you're not getting the right types of food for your type of body, all of us have different things going on. And if you're not getting those right types of nutrition, your body can't function at optimal level. And I believe the brain's the same as well. And I know there is certain types of brain foods that are out there when it comes to like omega-3s, anti-inflammatory type of fats, proteins, because our body is made up of mostly protein enzymes and things like that. And I know that there's also the gut and brain connection when it comes to the microbes and some of the neurotransmitters that are in the gut that help support the brain to make a proper assessment for the body's function. So when I was looking into this, there was a study out there that said that a proper type of healthy diet can actually help 30% reduction in some depressions, and maybe to the extent of some improvement in 40% for others, depending on who it is and what level of mental health they're in. Some things like, medication might make a difference in also the way that the body receives and absorbs food and nutrition and things like that. But it's really interesting for me to see this because, a lot of us are told when it comes to cardiovascular health or diabetes or things like that, there's a certain healthy way of eating that we need to follow, a certain regimen. But, rarely do we find doctors or tell us, look, change your diet, eat more good quality proteins, eat more good quality fats like walnuts and pistachios and maybe, your Greek lamb. Me too.
Great food source.
Exactly. No, but there, salmon and things like that as well. But obviously those things help build the function of the brain when it comes to neurotransmitters, maybe some of the hormonal components that come from the body as well, so that your body is not moody. You're not in the state of up and down fluctuation of your emotions, things like that. And also when I think about the children too, kids, when they go to school, what kind of foods do they consume? And is it enough for them to be able to sustain the rest of the day to sit down in class for like an hour and listen to a teacher talk and not fall asleep, and be able to absorb all that information into their brain and so that they can do well in school. All of this is necessary. And I always talk about nutrition and everything that I've done so far with the show. Every person that's come on, I've always resorted back to nutrition. Another thing that I was looking up is vitamin D, places that, don't have sunlight, they are deficient in vitamin D. So they do light therapy, but they also take in extra doses of vitamin D to combat that, and so they can bring their mood back up to a place of health. What do you think about all that?
I think one of the interesting side effects of this, COVID pandemic that we're going through is people are taking these things a lot more seriously, right? I've seen the vitamin D studies. I think people are just looking at what can we do to strengthen the immune system now.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, vitamin D, we think about how it helps our immune system. I talked about this in the other show too. Mm-hmm. A higher dose of vitamin D actually helps combat viruses. And but I'm sure some people forget. I'm sure they knew, but they've probably forgotten. And that actually helps with our personality too, with the way that we feel about things, the way that we react to things. So nutrition is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I know you're a workout person, and I know you feel like, along with the vitamin D, exercise is a big component. I think with children, they're naturally go out and play, and as adults, we don't. Right. So what happens when you exercise?
Well, I mean, I'm a product of, I'm a product of the school lunches, right, which aren't typically the most nutritious. So, yeah, and I'm not a nutritionist, but I agree with you that a lot of what the kids are eating probably isn't helping create that optimal physical health, right, that we need. And, John Rady, he wrote the book Spark. He did a couple interesting things. He went to some of the worst performing schools throughout Chicago, and he basically got these kids to start running, doing more exercises and things like that. And then what happened was the grades increased, the students started feeling better, and now, I mean, they've got it down to kind of a formula that kids and adults need about 50 to 60 minutes of exercise a day just for kind of that optimal functioning. So, and it's mental health too, right? It's not just your physical health. So it seems like humans were really built to just move pretty regularly.
Right. I mean, it does produce endorphins. It does produce oxytocin. It does produce all these good, feel-good hormones after doing some form of exercise. And it releases stress, mm-hmm. which is another component with the COVID-19 quarantine issues, that a lot of people are stuck at home with each other. They're not used to this space being occupied by so many bodies.
Right.
And then you have these kids who don't know, they have so much energy, they don't know what to do with themselves. And these parents are going, oh my God, I can't do this. What do we do? And I've seen a couple of people on TV and social media, families working out together at home, mm-hmm. which is really cool.
Yeah, I think it's really helped with these YouTube videos, right? People have a lot more access to, they can work with you, right? I'm sure you could create workouts for them. They can follow people online to do things. But yeah, we're in close quarters now, and if we can do things together, all the better, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I really feel strongly about children's first impression is your parents. Mm-hmm. How do parents deal with things? We watch our parents, right? Mm-hmm. What our parents eat nutritionally and what they give us. This is all molding us to who we become as an adult. So it's really a big responsibility of a parent in the way that they train their children at a young age, especially during this time. If a parent is stable and in the sense of emotional stability, and they're able to provide an education for them, this is a great time for them to look at their kids and say, look, we're home. What can we do? Okay, so here's structure. From 8 o'clock we have breakfast. This is what we're going to eat, and then maybe at like 10 o'clock we'll do a playtime. Maybe at 12 o'clock we'll do an hour reading, and having some kind of a stability at home because we're home. I mean, it's not like the parents can't have the excuse of saying, look, I'm going to go to work, you're going to go to school. This is going to help the parent also in the long term to kind of give them a guidance factor, because I think right now kids are feeling out of control. Mm-hmm. They're left to their own devices, and they don't know what else to do except look on the computer or look at their phones to play video games and things like that, which is fine. But if that's structured too, I think that helps bring certain level of stability to the home, but as well as the kids.
Yeah, I'm working with a lot of folks now that are doing walks with their family every morning. That's kind of how they start the day, right? And that's the vitamin D, right? The sunlight in the morning. They're connecting socially with the parents, and it's a great way to start the day. Just going for a walk, and then what's after that? Then maybe homework, and but I hear you. I think everyone is really struggling with this lack of structure, and I think that's probably one of the best things you can do is create kind of a daily discipline. And my hope is for the folks that I work with is that once we kind of get back to normal, if and when, whatever that kind of normal looks like, is that they'll be able to take these habits with them, afterwards too, right? So you can still keep walking once you can go back to work, or you can still go to the gym. Yeah,
you're creating a habit, and I think that's what I'm trying to get at is that when you had your kids go to school for, how many years at certain time to certain time, and all of a sudden that's taken away, there is online education, but still that's not really that long. It's not an 8-hour day. It's like an hour here and then maybe another hour for another class. But what I've seen is with other, my friends, I don't have kids, obviously, so I don't want to talk like I know it all. But what I've seen with other families is that the ones who had structure for their children, they were happier as adults, mm-hmm. but their kids were happier too, because they knew that at this time they were allowed to do their free time, and they knew that this time they had to continue with their extra education, whether it's reading and writing a book report. Coming from a personal story, my brother, when we were children, mm-hmm. it's summertime, would create a workout day plan for us. Like, we would get up in the morning, we'd go into the pool, and we'd swim like 25 laps.
Wow.
And then we would rest for like 15, 20 minutes. We'd go upstairs and we'd have our breakfast. My parents are working now, okay? And for an hour, he would practice his reading out loud, and I would practice my math. And then we would have lunch. And then we would have a time for play, like almost like theatrical plays. Mm-hmm. We'd create something. He would create something for me, and we would act it out. Or we would practice singing. And then we would have a time for other type of exercise, like maybe squats, push-ups, sit-ups. We were really fit in the summer.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then when it was 6 o'clock, my parents would come home, and then we would have dinner with my parents. And then it was almost time for bed, and we'd go to bed, and we'd do the same thing the next day. We did this for a whole summer. It was the best summer of my life. And because of that, he also got me into fitness. Now I'm a personal trainer for 30 years. I mean, talk about the influence of as a young kid, having that structure and what it did for me as an adult. And we'll look at what I'm doing today, right? Huge.
Yeah, this is really kind of a golden opportunity to create that kind of structure. And that sounds like an amazing experience too, just because you're learning, right? You're reading every day, you're working out. And there is some research that shows that after pretty vigorous exercise, you're able to retain whatever you're learning more after. And they don't really know is it the increased metabolism, is it more nutrients that your brain's getting, but somehow exercise really does help learning. So your brother it sounds like he was intuitively on the right track.
He was too advanced for his own good, seriously. Now, he could have been a brain surgeon. That's
totally.
That kind of brilliant guy. But when it comes to that kind of stuff, I'm just looking at what advantages we have right now. And you deal with, a lot with couples therapy. You deal with children with ADHD. You mm-hmm. deal with all sorts of issues when it comes to the struggles that we are all facing. Besides having the structure factor that we just talked about, what other things can kids, also parents, cope with? And what are some of the coping mechanisms that we can provide for these families?
Well, I think one of the things I've been running into is, it's what you kind of spoke about earlier, is that in these kind of close quarter situations, right, emotions can run high. Most people's worlds have been kind of flipped upside down, right? So when families are at home and they're, they might be more irritable with one another, I'm recommending a couple things, since, the first language, unfortunately, many of us learn is criticism, right?
Sure.
So when people are really kind of upset with one another, that's where they go to first. So I've been working with a lot of folks to get them to essentially disengage, right? Take a break, take 20 minutes to kind of clear your head. Excuse me. And there's, sorry, and there's actually a reason behind it. So we have different parts of our brain, right? Our limbic system is one of our lower parts of our brain. It's more primitive. It's where we kind of house our fight or flight center. So when we're really angry, typically we're going to shut off the thinking and judgment and reasoning segments of our brain, which we're going to need to actually kind of navigate a disagreement, right, I guess, as effectively or healthy as possible. So by taking the 20-minute break, it actually allows you to start thinking with your entire brain and then go back to it to kind of resolve it. And most people kind of slip up there where they'll take maybe a 5-hour break or a 2-day break and never talk about it again.
Right.
But if you can get back to it, it's usually the most advantageous, because each relationship kind of has 3 parts, right? There's harmony, there's disharmony, and there's repair. And most people don't spend enough time repairing what has kind of gone wrong.
Yeah, another thing that our elders don't realize when they're dealing with children too is that when you start training your child at a young age to start absorbing negative patterns, negative thoughts, teaching them, instead of teaching them to be confident within their own skin and confident with their decision making, you're teaching them a pattern to go to a place of negativity where their limbic system becomes a part of their programming. And that's terrible, because now as adults, they're making the same mistakes that their parents have made growing up. And that's not going to work.
Right, reacting instead of responding.
Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. And that makes me sad, because I think that could be avoided. There are some things that are, I guess, nature versus nurture, right? Mm-hmm. Some things that are going to be genetically part of our DNA that we may respond a certain way, but most of it is pretty much observed behavior, is it not?
Yeah, and it takes a lot of work to kind of undo that, to get someone that maybe habitually responds by reacting to situations. It takes a lot of work to kind of get them to respond, to take a break. And also, sometimes they actually feel like it's a sign of weakness by not, being the aggressor in some ways, right? So it's quite a mind shift kind of change.
Well, is there anything that they can do besides the 20-minute break and coming back and responding? Is there a language? Is there a way of thinking to organize your mind to respond?
There is. Yeah. What I work with folks on is called nonviolent communication, which is essentially a style of communicating. Initially, when people try it, it sounds very canned, because it's not very natural.
Right.
But the idea is you break up your concern into 4 parts. You've got your observation, kind of what happened. Hey, I noticed you, I don't know, took my 50-pound dumbbell, right?
That's always a problem at the gym.
That is. You need those. There's observation, then the feeling. Hey, that was really frustrating for me to experience. And sometimes I even recommend even a disclosure. Hey, when I was growing up, somebody in my family always took something from me, right? So it's kind of like it's almost like an empathetic statement. Hopefully that they'll grasp that it's not all them, but you might have kind of a personal, concern with this, right? It might have triggered you. And then the need. So you got observation, feeling, and then the need would be, that we live in a fair household, or that we live in a household where we ask one another for what we need. And then the last part is a request. Would you be willing to ask me next time you grab the dumbbell? And the idea is that you can't force anyone to really do anything, but if you make enough requests, people will be less defensive towards you. So that's a good way to.
That's also good in the workplace, I think.
Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
everywhere.
I mean, because a lot of times, like you said, we react and then we respond, and then our response is usually defensive, and that defensive becomes something more of a more volatile response from the other side. So it's just, it really is taking that breath, remembering it's not about you, it's not about the circumstance, it's more about it just so happens. Unless someone is maliciously doing something to you purposely. That's a different story.
Yep.
But most of the time, most people are doing things without even realizing they're doing it.
No, and that's the whole point of therapy, right, is to kind of bring these areas to light and to realize what we're bringing into each of our frustrations. Because sometimes it's, we'll project onto the outside world what we may not want to work on, right? It's like they say, if you point one finger at somebody, you're pointing kind of 3 back at yourself. So yeah, it's people are rarely as bad as we think they are, or rarely as good, right? They're just doing the best that they can, just like we are, right?
Yeah, we are doing what we're taught.
Yeah.
And those are our tools. And if you want to get better, just like anything in this world, like your job, you got to update your tools. You got to figure out how to do it better, And it's funny because, I look at couples too, like you deal with couple therapy as well. Their fights, usually there's a good way to fight and there's a bad way to fight.
Exactly.
And I've always tried to be a good arguer in this, if that sounds so bad, but in the sense that whatever that we're arguing about doesn't become worse.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It actually becomes clearer that my needs and your needs are completely different, and therefore we're responding to this in a way that's different.
Yep. It sounds like you're trying to kind of repair what happened instead of being right.
Right.
Which is kind of the ego side of things, right? That we want our side to be the right one, as opposed to probably the healthier way to do it is what's the best way to resolve this for both of us, right?
Yeah. Sometimes my father used to say, God rest his soul, he used to say, proving your point isn't always necessarily the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's better just to not say you're right, just to walk away from it, because it doesn't help the situation.
Yeah, exactly.
So in these close quarters with these families, and these kids, I noticed that some of these kids are in this, when they become depressed, it's really hard to kind of reach them. What do you do to reach teenagers, especially?
It's tempting to give recommendations, because we know what some of the research looks like, right? If people exercise more, if they eat healthier, oftentimes they can feel a lot better. But when you're working with somebody that's severely depressed, just how, you and I find it pretty easy to work out, right? It'd be hard for us probably to not exercise. Imagining the other perspective is, entering that world is really difficult, right? It takes a lot of work and motivation. So I spend a lot of time just trying to understand them, really getting their perspective before I offer anything, really, because everyone's kind of unique in what's kind of holding them back from kind of living the lives that they'd really like to.
I've also 100% agree with what you're saying. It's very selective and depending on what level of depression they're in. But I also find that when you empower a child with something that as a parent or a teacher, that they're good at, and you let them do that more often, their confidence levels go up. Mm-hmm. So their levels of depression could change too, because now they're doing something that they know they're good at, that people see them being good at, especially teenagers, because mm-hmm. it's all about popularity and being noticed by your peers. And the reason why I say that is because at the age of 5, I've had 2 really good teachers that I remember as a child. Mrs. Jones when I was 5 mm-hmm. and Mr. Kwik when I was in middle school. These teachers gave me responsibilities to watch over the student body in my class. So my teacher would leave at 5 years old. She said, okay, just do me a favor and make sure that everybody's in check.
Wow.
I'm 5. And I'm looking at her going, okay. And I thought, wow, she gave me this responsibility. I've got to do good. I want to please her, but I also got to do this job well. And every time she'd leave and she gave me that responsibility, I took that as there's something about me that she sees that I think I'm great at. So therefore, I had this pride that was with me, that carried on with me throughout my years. And same thing with Mr. Kwik. He would always encourage me to say, look, just because you're not good at this doesn't mean that you're stupid. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough. It just means that your way of looking at things are different.
Right.
And it's okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting because in other cultures where, when immigrants come to the U.S., right, they're typically working really hard, right? Their level of responsibility is much different than I think most people's, right? So when you go to different areas of the world, if they're a farming community, right, if you don't farm or you slack, right, it's going to have immediate consequences to your family. Whereas instilling that kind of responsibility in a really kind of like advanced, advanced culture or whatever, society, it's kind of hard to do, right? Because it's hard to say, hey, this homework assignment, this is worth everything, right? You need to, if you don't do this, it's going to have immediate consequences. It's hard just to replicate it.
Right.
So in your case, your teacher giving you that kind of responsibility, that's a real thing, right? They're not there. No one's looking over you.
Right.
You've got to just figure it out. And
right.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's responsibilities is a really good thing.
Yeah, you're giving them, and then also understanding where their gifts are. I mean, I think as a parent or a teacher or even an elder that you are a part of this kid's life, when you see their gifts and you push them to go that direction, because it'll be a lot easier for them. You're molding them into becoming maybe an entrepreneur, maybe good at whatever field they're liking, whether science or what have you. It's harder when you push them towards something that they're not good at. Let's say it was math, but they're great at the arts. Grow that part, because eventually they will get to that math and get better at it too. But when they have that confidence, I feel like it helps them grow in other areas of their lives.
Yeah, but it sounds like in your case, I think what might have helped was Mr. Kwik, I believe,
yeah.
Right? He kind of validated you. He saw you where you were,
right.
And kind of acknowledged that, yeah, you're not going to be able to do everything, but here's what you can do really well.
Right.
And oftentimes kids don't have someone like that can really kind of see them for who they are, right? So it sounds like it was a really special relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not young anymore, and I remember this
right.
going back, 30 plus 40 years. I mean, this is going, who remembers their teacher, when they're 5 years old, right? So that impression is huge, and what a blessing that was for me. I'm hoping it's like that for all these kids because, I have a niece, and I want to encourage her with her gifts. She's sometimes awkward in things, and sometimes she's brilliant in other things, and I try to tell her, look, it's okay. We don't have to be perfect because of the social media world that we live in. it's really hard for these teenagers to understand they're not going to look like these guys. They're not going to sound like these guys. Right. They need to be themselves as an individual, and it's okay to be who they are.
Totally. I'm so glad I didn't grow up with Twitter
or
Instagram.
Yes.
I kind of describe it that, when I talk about growing up in that time, it's like, back when I was 14 or 13, everybody was kind of miserable, right?
Yeah.
We couldn't really compare with anybody else's life.
No.
There was no, Instagram millionaire, little models.
It's all a facade. Yeah. It's not the real world. I mean, we all have filters on our photos. I mean, this is not what we really look like. It's like...
Yeah, but it limits us from making mistakes too, right? Because that's part of growing up, is just being yourself and making mistakes, just getting messy in life. And now that, there's so much thought put into how we present ourselves to the world, right? It really limits us just being kind of spontaneous, or especially kids, I think.
Yeah, and I think that because of the social media too, people are so stuck on their phones that integrative, mixing of kids and playing the traditional way is gone too. I mean, I don't see that as often anymore. I see kids sitting there next to each other on their phones, and they're not even looking at each other. And this is causing also a disconnect for them to understand how to relate to each other and how to relate to themselves, because all they see is what someone's writing on their Instagram or what have you, and they're missing that emotional, because that's what your specialty is, in that emotional connection of, I feel this way, because they can't communicate now. I feel this way when you look at me that way.
Right. Yeah, and in psychology, the idea is called affect tolerance, right? Tolerating really kind of complicated emotions. So if you're with a bunch of friends and you're really uncomfortable, 20 years ago, there was no phone to entertain yourself with. Well, there was primitive phones, right? There was Nokias.
Those big phones.
Yeah, but not much going on there.
No.
But ultimately, we had to just kind of figure things out, right? You had to look at your friends, make sense of what's going on, and ultimately be comfortable being uncomfortable, where now it's really easy to kind of self-soothe through kind of a number of ways. So, yeah, it is definitely limiting in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna take us a break here. We're gonna do a quick 30-second break, and then when we come back, we're gonna continue with Dr. Tolly, because his information is amazing, and I know we have a lot more to cover. So you guys just stay tuned. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
The Honolulu Club is still here for you. We are providing the safest workout conditions on the island, with modified safe distancing indoor and outdoor classes, large open work floor with clean, sanitized machines, and free weights. Let the Honolulu Club be your one and only fitness destination. Go to honoluluclub.com and fill out the trial pass today.
Have you heard of microcurrent therapy? If you suffer from chronic pain, arthritis, sports injuries, ligament injuries, or migraines, the electroequiscope can help. This non-invasive treatment system is drug-free and shows no negative side effects. If you are seeking pain relief and want to boost your immune system, schedule a demonstration or consultation by calling Kelly, your microcurrent electrotoxologist, at 485-9697, or follow on Instagram at Kelly's Time. Make your appointment today.
All right, we're back. Okay, so we're here with Dr. Tolly. He's a clinical and behavioral psychologist, and his specialties are in ADHD with kids or adults, and couples therapy, emotional behavioral responses, and coping with stress. And, we were talking a little bit about, the disconnect with, teenagers and their emotional connection with each other, and how to empower them with maybe some kind of a structure, at home, giving them something to look forward to every day for their projects or what have you. And as a family, maybe working out together and getting those good endorphins and good feeling hormones out there so that everyone relaxes a bit more and not as stressful at home. But when it comes to our mental health, we talked a little bit about nutrition, and how nutrition can also help with our mental health and provide our bodies with the right source of enzymes and proteins and things like that for our brain to be able to process the information to our system. When it comes to how we can reach our mental health goals, Dr. Tolly, tell me, what can we do to, let's say, if we want to get out of this funk, if we're starting to feel like we're starting to get depressed because money isn't coming in, we don't have our stability in our job, we don't know when we're going to pay off our bills, and people start getting to this fear, depression, anxiety. How do we get out of that?
Well, that's a tough one, because like you said, there's a lot of things that can kind of contribute to feeling anxious, right, or depressed. And I have been seeing a lot more of it just because everyone's world's, like I spoke about earlier, has been kind of flipped upside down. But I typically start off with, well, there's two ways you can kind of look at it. Some folks have a really hard time getting started, or some folks really just stay busy and maybe not work on the things that are going to give you kind of the biggest bang for the buck. So I usually recommend something from the book called Organize Tomorrow Today, which is, it talks a lot about process-oriented goals and results-oriented goals. So first off, if you have a goal of maybe, hey, I'm a college student, I'm doing online classes, I want to get a 4.0. That would be kind of a results-oriented goal. At the end of the year, or at the end of the semester, you're going to have one opportunity to feel good about yourself. Whereas a process-oriented goal is, I'm going to read for an hour. I can control that every day. I'm going to email my teachers, right? I've been encouraging a lot of kids to do that more, right? Get on Google Docs, email or text your teacher, or whatever you need to do to communicate more. And maybe you're just going to do some homework for another 2 hours. So the idea there is you have 3 opportunities each day to feel really good about yourself, and that can help build some momentum.
Yeah, that's like I said, we're a bit of the structure factor too, giving yourself a habit of being able to say, okay, besides doing all the other things, communication is another thing to teach ourselves, right? How do I communicate with my family? How do I communicate with my teachers? How do I communicate with my, friends? When do I communicate? And I always tell my niece this as well, and I know we're talking more about teenagers, is you got to put a time as to when you are able to talk to your friends or not. Like, there's got to be a policy, like, okay, after 10 o'clock, I can't text or I can't call, that way you're shutting down also, because sleep is a big part of also
Huge,
our health,
Yep.
our mental health. So if you're not getting enough sleep, there's a study that says less than 7 hours, you're not able to make proper decisions.
Yeah.
You're not able to make proper responses.
Yep.
So if a child isn't sleeping enough because they're too busy on their computers and watching TV because they're free, they're on vacation, right?
Pretty much.
That's not good. Same for adults. We need to start shutting down at a certain time so that our brain processes work properly. That's the same part of the structure idea that you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah, and it's funny. What a lot of teenagers are kind of going through right now is two things. One, they're not reaching out to their friends enough because I don't know if I'm going to be bothering them, or they haven't reached out to me first. So what's happening is these kids that need communication are kind of at this impasse, right? They're waiting for one another to reach out. But what I'm recommending is try not to text, try not to call, FaceTime everybody you can, because our brains actually need a lot of that. We have there's this concept in psychology called polyvagal nerve theory, where the idea is that social reciprocity, right, back and forth communication, is really healthy for our brains. We don't get that via text. We don't get that response. So I'm telling the teenagers, FaceTime everybody. Well, what if they're sleeping or something? Well, they won't answer the phone. But the idea is you want to communicate as much as you can with as much data as you can, and you can't really do that over text. And then there's so many misunderstandings, miscommunications. It's just not a good. I wouldn't hang my head on that for biological development.
Let me tell you, I'm the worst writer, and people that know me
Same.
well know that really well. So if I had text you about something, I have to write there, by the way, I'm not mad.
Sure, and I'm
so
very.
You don't take it the wrong way.
Yeah, I get a lot of texts a day too, so I'm very brief. So it really doesn't convey. And sometimes, if somebody texts me a lot of information, I'm just like, I can't respond that fully. It's not going to capture my response. So it's not the best way to go about it, especially now, because a developing teenage brain actually needs a lot of communication, right? They need to get in these experiences where they're learning different social situations, and there's a concern now with the preschoolers where they're missing out. They may miss out on a whole year's worth of biological development, right? Because they're not getting these interactions.
So do you think, this is a really hard time too, because social distancing is this thing, right? How do you get kids to play when they're supposed to be social distancing? And even though now things are opening up and more, and the beaches are open and people are playing more, that's great. But at the same time, there's that fear again too. So I was just talking about this in previous shows. I feel like I'm jumping all over the place, but fear is my biggest concern for this population now, because we all have like a phobia now when it comes to this virus. They're afraid to go out into public. They're afraid to socialize because they might get this virus. And although it may happen, I'm not downgrading anything by no means. This is just, look, there's 1 million people on this island. I said this before. We have 640 something cases here. 17 people passed away. The statistics is really small. It's very contagious if you come across somebody who has it. You will get it because of the contagion. But it's just that I feel like we got to take a look at facts too. And if you're going to go out into society, I don't want people to have fear. How do we stop that fear that's been created for 3 months?
I'm not sure. I have been following this pretty closely, and I think one of the answers that I kind of like, and I'm not a biologist, and I don't fully understand the transmission rates, but The Economist magazine, their stance is, since kids aren't as efficient carriers as we thought, but we're still learning so much.
That's changing constantly.
Right. That's the whole other issue, right? So they're kind of recommending that younger kids start going back to school because they have the most. They may suffer the most, right? Because their parents are home with them instead of working, right? They're not getting those interactions that they need to grow, and then as kids get older, and then businesses. But every state's kind of doing their own thing. No one really knows exactly what's happening, but nobody wants COVID, right? So, unfortunately, I don't think there's any good answer. I think, if someone feels safe enough to, and actually, I think another recommendation they had was, obviously testing as many people as possible, right? Which is a great idea, because then you can kind of trace it and you can use some technology for that. But it's a scary time because nobody wants to schedule a play date and
the socializing is stopped completely. Right? And I think your idea of FaceTime is brilliant because you almost are there, you're almost there with that person.
It's almost like magic, right?
Right.
They're there.
I think that's why we have so many Zoom stuff going on, and all the other types of social medias that are like that. I find that to be very helpful too. And if you're a visual person, you need that stimulant. But then sometimes I wonder if having too much stimulant with this social media stuff is also bombarding us in a way subconsciously. It
is. So what's happening is people are feeling exhausted after Zoom meetings all day, because what's happening is our brains want to complete things, right? That's why we don't like listening to people talking on the phone. It's actually really annoying to most people because the idea behind it is we can't hear the other conversation. We're only hearing half of it.
Right.
So our brain wants to figure it out, even if we don't really care what they're talking about. So when we're on these Zoom calls, we're not picking up all the data, right? So our brains are really struggling to figure out exactly what they're conveying through their body language and tone and things like that. So it's actually a little more exhausting.
Yeah, and then you find that when you sleep, your dreams are chaotic.
Right. I've been hearing about, I don't know if there's any research, but I have been hearing about that on my Facebook feed, right?
And you wake up exhausted, like you went to another party or another meeting. You're like, what happened? I'm trying to decompress. And I think, again, taking back to the sleep, it's so important for us to have that deep sleep, for us to be able to regenerate the brain, because that's where our brain gets its food, right? When you're sleeping. Yep.
And it's really cool. There's an app called Calm, which they have some celebrities that kind of go over what's important to them. And one of the ones that they just had on was LeBron James, where he talks about the importance of sleep for like 10 minutes and basically how he schedules his entire life around his sleep. So, and his nap, right?
So true.
And he's telling people, he's like, I'm an elite athlete, obviously. You're not going to need to be this serious, but maybe you should be. Which, if you have a 4 a.m. wake up or whatever, go back 8 hours and then 2 hours before that, right, to wind down, turn off the electronics, read, like you said earlier. And they are finding that, the more sleep, the better, really.
Well, same thing with fitness. So that's my expertise. If you don't sleep, your body doesn't recover or grow.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people, if people laugh at me, I'm like, I have to get at least, because I have fibromyalgia too. So I need to get at least 8 hours of sleep, at least. And if
non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. And if I don't, I don't feel well that next day. I feel like I have the flu, but I don't. It's like the fibromyalgia flu. But I always tell people sleep is what saves me more so. Second part is my nutrition. So first is sleep, and then it's my nutrition. If it wasn't for those two things, I'd be on medication. And I'm not on any medication for this at all.
Wow. And if you don't mind me asking, and I'm always curious, what's your morning routine look like with nutrition and exercise?
Well, this morning I made myself organic blueberries, organic strawberries with macadamia nut milk. I put collagen that has got 11 grams of protein, 11,000 micrograms of collagen, and some hyaluronic acid. And then I put some trace minerals in that, and I drank that. And then an hour later I had organic, non-toxic coffee. It's a special coffee that you buy. It doesn't have any toxins or molds or things like that.
You have to send me a link. I was just talking about getting a new coffee.
No, it's good. There's one called Life Boost. It's a really good one. And I think even, what's his name? What's this guy? What's the ketogenic guy? Can't remember. I'll remember it after this. Anyways, he's got a coffee that's called Mentalist, and it's supposed to be really good for your brain. It's supposed to help with, waking you up and just keeping you sharp and helping you. Yeah, it's really, really good. I'll send you that link as well, and I'll put it on my YouTube, guys, when I put this together for you. But also, it's I also have like non-sugary, like organic. It's almost gluten-free, like cereal sometimes, and sometimes I'll make gluten-free pancakes for myself. Like I have carbs in the morning. But I have some protein in there, but my meal is carbs. I also do intermittent fasting. So I do like 14 hours, at least 5 days a week, so that it helps my growth hormone stimulant and my ketones. And I try to get the insulin balance so that my body's able to do what it's supposed to do. And at least 3 days out of that fasting, I try to do 17 to 18 hours of fasting because it gets my autophagy going. So it detoxes my cells. So when you do that, you're allowing the oxidative stress levels to stay stabilized. And you're allowing the cells to regenerate enough so that you're getting enough ATP, which is the energy function of the cell.
Wow, and it's a lot of organic stuff too, right? So it
has to
healthy.
be.
Wow,
it has to be. Look, not all of us have the financials to do that, but there are places like even Safeway here in Hawaii has organic products that you can go and buy. So I'll buy grass-fed, grass-finished meat so that I get the omega-3 instead of the omega-6 because we're so saturated with omega-6 here in the American diet. But I do have like brown rice pasta because I try to stay away from gluten. I try to stay away from any type of breads, all the good stuff that people love.
Sure.
I can't have it. And if I have it 2 days in a row, I'm screwed. My body just goes nuts.
Wow. Well, brown rice pasta is actually pretty good.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
a
not
fan.
bad.
Yeah.
Yes. I let me tell you, I mix it with a lot of avocado oil.
Nice.
So I do that. So it's good stuff. I mean, my regimen is not so strict, but it's strict enough so that I'm able to maintain a body weight. I'm able to get the results that I need. And when I get out of my regimen, I know that I've gotten out of my regimen, I actually go back to my routine and I'm back in alignment again.
And energy too, right?
Yes.
You need a lot of it.
Brain. So fibromyalgia patients usually have brain fog. Because their body is breaking down so quickly and so much that their energy is being used to sustain life, right? So you're pulling from the brain. So, everything you eat, most of it has to go to the brain because that's what powers the body, right? When you're pulling from that, well, what happens? You can't think properly. You're not making proper decisions. If I don't sleep enough, don't put me in the car. It's like getting a massage and driving. You're kind of loopy,
Right.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm actually reading a book called Sapiens right now that's talking about how rare it is to how lucky we are to be a human, right? Because our brains they consume a lot of energy, right? More than other animals. So we need a lot of food. We're kind of a high maintenance animal.
And people don't understand that. We do. We have to consume for our brain.
Yeah.
Because the brain is telling our body what to do. And if our brain doesn't get the nutrients, our body is going to start lacking in the response, especially neurologically, right? Our neurotransmitters don't function as well. The communication between neurotransmitters, it becomes dull. So that's why I was in the next show, I'm going to do a topic on serotonin and tryptophan.
Oh, cool.
And so, they talk about tryptophan being in blood and in the brain and also in the gut. Well, if you don't have enough tryptophan going into the brain, you're also missing out on that conduction and communication. And also, your happy mood.
Mood, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting stuff. There's so much information out there That's why sometimes I feel like I'm all over the place in these conversations, because there's so much that I want to tell everybody.
Yeah, and it's almost like you don't know where to start, right? Because there's so much new research, there's competing research, and it's hard really just to figure out how we do this whole thing. But I think one of the good things to come out of this pandemic is researchers are a lot more transparent with one another, right? They're trying, because everybody really wants to figure this thing out, which I think is, hopefully that's the way we move into the future, where we're all in this together kind of thing, as opposed to this university came up with this breakthrough all on their own. I think that's cool, but if they can get support and maybe produce things a year earlier, and they kind of spread that, I guess, success with other, universities and things like that, I think that'd probably be much better.
Yeah, we can come up with some healing factors instead of having it be like, well, this doesn't have enough stats, so we don't know if this is really going to work for you. But I mean, it's true. There is a lot of publications out there that don't give us the exact be all end all type of thing when it comes to like the serotonin factor, or how does that work in our body, and tryptophan, if you take too much of it, what happens to your system. And it's all relative, and that's why you need to go to a doctor like you, or go to a medical doctor, your internist, physician, and have these conversations too, because when it comes to your mental health, they're not psychiatrists, but they kind of know how the body works. I mean, we still don't know much about the brain yet. I mean, there's so much information out there, but yet there's nothing.
or nothing cohesive, right, that can explain. Yeah, and everyone's different, too, individually, right? So it makes it more complicated. I
mean, yeah, in another conversation you and I will have, maybe we can dive into, what causes personality disorders, what causes that brain to just misfunction, because there's so many different types of personality disorders out there, and do all of them have to be medicated, and can this be fixed through other ways? I'll
have to bring about 100 books here so we can start sifting through it. But yeah, it's a good talk. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a good starting point to have the discussion.
Is. I mean, there's so many. What makes me sad really quick too, and I know we're coming so close to the end of this, is that the homeless population here in our island, it breaks my heart to see families. And then I was telling one of the politicians that's running for mayor, I said, look, there's three folds that I think we should be looking at when it comes to the homeless and their mental health. One is the first group is that we can't help them. They need to go to an institution. They really do. They've got too many issues going on, and they need to be taken care of. The second group is that they just need a little help. Maybe they need to go to a house where they can sleep and they'd be taken care of, but they also are taught skills. They're taught ways to coping. How to make proper choices instead of just giving up on themselves, teaching them some confidence and putting them back out in the workforce, and then having them come to a place where it's safe, like a safe house. The third group is just, they're just down and out because Hawaii is too expensive. Maybe we just need to help them with, sending them somewhere where they can just learn a skill and then sit them back out into the community. I don't know. But we need that resource. We need that expertise of people like you to be able to guide some of these politicians to help direct the homeless situation, because a lot of them, their mental health may be fixable.
Yeah, and it's a real concern too, right? Because if somebody's they don't have the basic necessities met, they're not going to be focused on getting, organic, organic foods and things like that. So
no, they can't. Yeah.
So they're, I agree with you. It's a big concern.
Yeah, like I said, driving to the studio, I see at least 5 or 6 on the side of the road, and you can't help them all, but I want to figure out a way to, not me personally, but us as a community, how do we help direct those that can be helped at least, and get them off the streets so that they are living a quality life.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe we should first bring down the cost of living in Hawaii.
That'd be nice.
That's a different topic, though.
I endorse that.
Yes, me too. It's crazy to think that $60,000 is considered low income here in Hawaii.
Yeah, that is really crazy. Yeah.
So we're all poor here. So any last thoughts on what else we can do to save ourselves from this quarantine, COVID-19 depression thing that we're going through?
Sure. I mean, I guess to summarize, I think some of the things we talked about today were just, establishing a good daily structure, make sure you include regular exercise if you can in whatever capacity that's kind of safe, and, keep improving that sleep, right? Sleep hygiene. It's not just sleep anymore. So there's a lot of variables that I think if people could tweak and improve, could probably improve the overall quality of their lives.
They can control that at least, yeah.
Yeah.
And control your nutrition if you can, yeah. So that's important. And if any of our viewers want to reach out to you and see if they can get some therapy, what's a good website for them to reach out? Because I'm sure your website has a contact, yeah?
It does. And actually not taking new patients right now.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, we're pretty busy.
Just say you know me, guys. Say, I know Bianca. Then maybe that'll get you in.
After a few months, maybe. But, yeah, I'm apparently on Twitter, too. I just found out. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. But my website is psychologycenterhawaii.com
Okay.
/index.html. And I'm working on that last portion to remove it, but.
And I think your Twitter is Dr. Tolly, right?
It is, yeah.
Yes.
Pretty easy.
And your Instagram is Dr. Tolly as well.
Yeah, I got really creative with those, yeah.
It's all good. It's awesome. And what's a good number for them to reach you if they want to be referred out to another?
Oh, sure. 808-722-1270.
Perfect. All right, guys. This has been fun for me.
Me too.
I can't say enough, but I definitely want to bring you back on. So you have no choice.
Thanks.
You will have to come.
This was awesome. This is a really cool experience for me too.
Awesome. I'm glad you had fun.
Yeah, thanks for making it easy for me. I appreciate it.
Well, you made it easy for me too. Thank you for your knowledge and I appreciate all you're doing for everybody. So that's awesome.
Likewise.
And guys, if you want to reach out to me in any way, shape, or form, my website is Be Fit for Health. That's with the number 4.com. Be Fit for Health. And then, like Dr. Tolly, I'm not that creative, so my fitness, my Facebook is Be Fit for Health. My Instagram is Be Fit for Health, and my YouTube is Be Fit for Health.
Didn't see that coming.
I didn't see that coming. No, I didn't. So yeah, and if you guys need some online training and if you guys need some coaching on nutrition, let me know. I'm there for you guys as well. I don't have a waiting list like Dr. Tolly, but I'm available for that as well. I'd love to help you guys as much as I can. I think I have a program going on, like a promo. It's if you type in Cool Gold 10, it's KOOL Gold, the number 10 on the barcode there. When you check out, you'll get 10% off just for the rest of the remaining of I guess this month as well. So just want to let you guys know I'm there for you, and Dr. Tolly is there for you. We appreciate you guys tuning in. I appreciate your time. Take care of yourselves, stay healthy, and aloha.